These failings, identified by investigative journalists, not only let my mother down and my family down, they let the public down too.
There was one sentence Tom Parker Bowles should never have said at a royal dinner. He did not mock Catherine's clothes. He did not question her title. He went somewhere far more personal. He suggested that the woman Britain had come to trust had spent years learning how to perform Diana. William heard it. Catherine heard it. Camilla heard her own son say it. And within seconds, William's chair was moving backwards. But that sentence was not the only thing that changed the room. The real damage came afterward, when William looked across the table and asked a question Tom could not answer cleanly. A question that suddenly made one cruel remark feel much bigger than one man's opinion. Because if Tom felt comfortable enough saying it in front of William and Catherine, where had that idea really come from? Only minutes earlier, the dinner had been calm. Conversation had moved through upcoming engagements, public confidence, the future of the monarchy, and the growing responsibility William and Catherine were expected to carry. Charles had spoken warmly about Catherine's discipline under pressure. Others at the table had agreed. Nothing about the evening suggested that anyone was about to cross a line. Then somebody said something simple. The public trusted Catherine, not admired her, not merely liked her, trusted her. That word settled differently. Catherine had become more than William's wife in the eyes of millions. She represented steadiness, family, restraint, and a quiet reliability that could not easily be manufactured. Tom Parker Bowles had listened through most of the praise. Queen Camilla's son, a food writer and critic, had barely interrupted, but as the conversation kept returning to Catherine, his silence began to feel less comfortable. Then he finally joined in. At first, it sounded almost complimentary. Catherine understood the role exceptionally well, he suggested. She knew what people wanted from a Princess of Wales. She understood how to connect. She knew when to speak, when to remain quiet, how to dress without overwhelming the occasion, how to show emotion without allowing emotion to take over. Then the list became sharper. The soft expressions, the understated clothes, the careful gestures around children, the controlled vulnerability during difficult moments. One detail after another, each observation, taken alone, sounded harmless. Then Tom brought up Diana. That was the moment the air changed. He suggested Catherine's enormous popularity existed partly because she had become very good at presenting the kind of princess Britain already knew how to love. Then came the line that froze the table. She's been very successful at becoming the kind of princess people wanted to remember. Royal watchers, what on earth gave Queen Camilla's own son the audacity to sit at that table and speak about Catherine like this? Do not just sit there angry and keep watching in silence. Tell everyone below exactly what you think gave Tom Parker Bowles that confidence. And before you move on, let the entire comment section say it together. We love you, Catherine. If you believe she has endured enough disrespect and deserves to be defended when somebody crosses the line, hit the like button, share this story with another royal watcher, and subscribe to Palace Beacon right now, because when thousands of people speak with one voice, nobody can pretend the public did not notice how far that remark crossed the line. Catherine did not answer him. That made the silence heavier. She did not challenge Tom, demand an apology, or try to embarrass him in front of the table. Her eyes lowered for a moment. Her hand paused beside her glass. Her expression stayed controlled, but William knew her too well to mistake composure for indifference. Tom continued. Some women, he suggested, became loved simply for who they were. Others understood exactly what image people wanted to see. That was no longer an observation about royal presentation. It was a judgment on Catherine's character. Her warmth became strategy. Her restraint became rehearsal. Her connection with people became performance. And because the words came from Camilla's son, another question entered the room without anybody needing to say it aloud. Was this only Tom's view, or had Catherine been spoken about this way before, somewhere William was not present to hear it? William looked at Catherine once more. Then he looked back at Tom. The man across from him had not simply insulted his wife. He had taken the memory of William's mother and used it to question whether Catherine was genuine at all. The scrape of William's chair across the floor cut through the room. He stood, slowly, deliberately, furious. For Catherine, the sting of Tom Parker Bowles's remark did not begin at that dinner table. It began years earlier, with a comparison she had never asked for and could never completely escape. She had not simply married Prince William, she had married the eldest son of Diana, Princess of Wales. And from the moment Catherine stepped into royal life, every photograph seemed to invite the same question. Was there something of Diana in the clothes, in the smile, in the way she bent down to speak with a child, in the way crowds reacted when she entered a room? The comparisons followed everywhere. A coat could become a headline. A gesture could become a photograph placed beside one from 20 years earlier. A visit to a hospital, a hand on somebody's shoulder, a quiet moment with a child. Even the way Catherine carried herself during a difficult public appearance could be pulled into a story about the woman who had once held the same title. And William had watched all of it. He had watched Catherine enter a family where his mother's memory was not a distant piece of history. Diana was personal. She was the woman whose face William had known before the world turned it into an icon.
It's hard because obviously Catherine didn't know her, so she cannot really provide that level of detail. So I do regularly putting George or Charlotte to bed, talk about her. And
she was the mother whose absence had followed him into adulthood, into marriage, and eventually into fatherhood. That made one thing especially important. Catherine had never tried to replace her. She had never needed to.
No one's going to try and, no one's trying to fill my mother's shoes, and what she did is fantastic. It's about making your own future and your own destiny, and Kate will do a very good job of that.
The pressure was already enormous. Without turning Diana into a contest Catherine could never win. If Catherine dressed too differently, people noticed. If she wore something that reminded people of Diana, they noticed that too. If she showed emotion, the comparison appeared. If she stayed composed, the comparison still appeared. There was no clean way out of it. And that was why Tom's words carried such a different kind of cruelty. He was not accusing Catherine of struggling to escape Diana's shadow. He was accusing her of using it. That distinction changed everything. There was another reason the accusation cut so deeply. Diana was not simply a famous predecessor whose style could be copied and forgotten. She was William's mother. Any suggestion that Catherine had deliberately borrowed from her carried an intimacy Tom could not separate from the family sitting around him. And Tom was not a distant commentator making the observation from a television studio. He was Queen Camilla's son, seated inside the same family circle, speaking directly in front of the man who had spent years protecting both Diana's memory and Catherine's place beside him. That gave the words another edge. They were no longer commentary from outside the palace. They had entered the family itself, across a table where every person understood how sensitive Diana's name remained. Across the dinner table, Tom slowly turned his glass between his fingers while Charles continued speaking. Catherine listened without interrupting. William's eyes moved from his father to Tom, then back to Catherine. Nothing dramatic happened. No one raised a voice. Not yet. But the conversation had reached the exact subject Tom seemed unable to leave alone. Catherine's public standing. For years, the qualities people admired in her had appeared almost painfully simple. She showed up. She remained calm. She spoke carefully. She gave attention to the person in front of her. She handled scrutiny without making every difficult moment about herself. To William, those things were not performance. They were the private habits he had seen when cameras were gone. That was the part Tom could not see. He did not see every quiet conversation before an engagement. He did not see the moments Catherine worried about getting something wrong, then went out and did the work anyway. He did not see the weight of stepping into a title permanently tied to a woman Britain still remembered with extraordinary emotion. William did. And because he did, the suggestion that Catherine had studied Diana like a blueprint was not merely rude. It rewrote years of William's own life with her. It suggested that the woman beside him had not earned trust through consistency. She had engineered it. It suggested that her restraint was calculated, her warmth selected, her public manner assembled piece by piece from memories that already belonged to somebody else. That was why Catherine's silence mattered so much. She had spent years refusing to turn Diana into a rivalry. She had never needed to diminish William's mother in order to establish herself. She had allowed the comparisons to come and go without fighting every headline, every photograph, every whispered judgment. Now Tom was about to claim the opposite. He was about to suggest that Catherine had not merely lived under Diana's shadow. She had learned how to use it. And the reason he finally pushed the conversation that far came down to one word Charles had used about Catherine earlier that evening: trust. The dinner had reached the part of the evening when conversation usually softened. Plates had been cleared, voices had settled, the room no longer felt ceremonial, it felt private. Charles had been speaking about the strain the family had carried through years and the amount of responsibility that was now falling on the younger generation. His tone was measured, but the point was clear. The monarchy could not afford to look distant. It needed people the public still felt connected to. Catherine's name came up naturally. Charles spoke about resilience, about the way she had continued to carry herself through pressure without allowing every difficult moment to become a spectacle. He said very little that sounded exaggerated. That made the praise stronger. Someone else at the table mentioned the future. Not next month, not the next engagement, the future of the monarchy itself. The conversation shifted toward William and Catherine, their children, and the way the younger Wales family had become a point of emotional connection for people who no longer followed every royal event. There was talk of school visits, public walkabouts, family appearances, and the strange ability Catherine had to make formal occasions feel less formal without breaking the rules that held them together. Tom said nothing. He listened. Charles continued. Another voice at the table remarked that Catherine had something the institution could not simply create through planning or publicity. The public trust her. That sentence changed the temperature. Tom looked up. He did not challenge it directly. He did not laugh. He did not interrupt with anything obviously hostile. He entered softly. Catherine, he said, certainly understood the position well. No one reacted. It was true enough on the surface. Catherine had spent years learning the demands of royal life. She knew protocol, timing, presentation, and the discipline required to remain composed in rooms where every movement could be photographed. Tom continued. She understood what the public expected from a Princess of Wales. Still defensible. Charles gave no sign that he objected. Catherine remained attentive. William watched Tom more closely now, though there was still nothing in the words themselves that demanded a confrontation. Then Tom began to explain what he meant. He mentioned the clothes first. Understated, familiar, never too loud. Then the emotion, controlled, visible enough to feel human, restrained enough to appear steady. Then the children, the way Catherine lowered herself to their level, the way she listened, the way photographs of those moments traveled further than formal speeches ever could. Then the warmth, the small touches, the careful pauses, the expressions that seemed to make people feel as though they had been noticed. One observation, then another, then another. Nothing in the list was offensive by itself. Together, they began to sound different. The conversation no longer felt like praise. It felt like Tom was taking Catherine apart piece by piece and laying the pieces on the table. William's attention sharpened. Camilla heard it too. The change was slight but unmistakable. What had started as commentary on Catherine's strengths was becoming an argument about how those strengths had been built. Then Tom mentioned Diana. The room went still before he even finished the thought. He suggested that Catherine's success came partly from understanding the emotional memory attached to the title she carried. Britain already knew what it wanted to feel when it looked at a Princess of Wales, he said. Certain gestures worked, certain qualities landed, certain images stayed with people. Then came the line. She's been very successful at becoming the kind of princess people wanted to remember. Silence. Not outrage. Not yet. The sentence simply sat there. Catherine looked down. Her fingers stopped beside her glass. She did not move it. She did not answer. William looked at her, then back at Tom. Across the table, Camilla's eyes shifted toward William. She had seen the change in his face. The warmth had gone out of it. Charles stopped speaking. Tom seemed to notice, finally, that the room had not received his observation as clever analysis. So he pushed again. Some women, he suggested, were loved simply because of who they were. Others became loved because they understood exactly what image people wanted to see. That was the moment the meaning became impossible to soften. Catherine was not being praised for understanding duty. She was being accused of understanding performance. Her connection with people was no longer instinct. It was strategy. Her restraint was not character. It was calibration. The room had gone quiet enough for every small sound to matter. Tom tried to explain. He said he was talking about public image, about presentation, about how modern royalty worked. He started adding context to words that no longer needed context. Too late. William had heard enough. Catherine remained still, and somehow that made everything worse. She did not rescue Tom by reacting. She did not give him an argument to hide behind. She simply sat there, wounded and composed, while his explanation grew thinner with every sentence. Tom kept talking. William stopped listening. Then William's chair scraped across the floor. William stood, but he did not shout. That made the room more uncomfortable. There was no fist against the table, no dramatic gesture, no burst of anger that could be dismissed as temper. He simply rose, looked directly across at Tom Parker Bowles, and let the silence settle before he spoke. "You do not speak about my wife like that." The sentence was quiet. It landed harder because of it. Tom blinked, then tried to pull the conversation back into safer territory. He said the point had been about public image, nothing more. Royal presentation, media expectation, the way historic roles carried certain visual and emotional associations. He insisted he had been talking about how people responded to symbols, not making a personal attack on Catherine. William did not move. Tom kept explaining. He spoke about the pressure attached to the title, the comparisons made by newspapers, the way every Princess of Wales would inevitably be viewed through history. He tried to turn what he had said into an abstract discussion about monarchy, branding, memory, and public perception. William refused to let him, because that was not what had happened. Tom had not criticized a communications plan. He had questioned Catherine's character. William made the distinction with brutal clarity. Catherine had never asked to be Diana. She had never claimed to be Diana. She had never entered the family pretending that she could replace the woman who had been William's mother. And she had never needed to. The title came with history. Everyone knew that. Catherine knew it better than most, but carrying history was not the same as exploiting it. William's voice tightened. Tom had taken every quality Catherine had spent years showing in public and recast it as calculation. He had suggested that kindness could be technique. That restraint could be theatre. That warmth could be strategy. Then he had used Diana to make the accusations stick. That was the part William could not let pass. His mother was not a comparison chart. She was not a set of gestures for somebody else to copy. And she was certainly not a weapon Tom could pick up at dinner and use against William's wife. The room had gone completely still. Camilla looked from William to Tom and understood, perhaps more quickly than anyone else, how badly the conversation had turned. Her son had done something far bigger than make an awkward remark. He had dragged Diana into a room containing Charles, Camilla, William, and Catherine all at once. There was almost no name more capable of reopening old fault lines. Camilla tried to intervene carefully. She suggested Tom's meaning had been misunderstood. She said he had been talking generally about public expectation and the burden of royal roles. It was an attempt to lower the temperature without directly defending the words themselves. William did not accept it. He looked toward Camilla only briefly before returning his attention to Tom. Misunderstood. No. The meaning had been clear enough. If Tom had wanted to discuss media strategy, he could have discussed media strategy. If he wanted to discuss historical comparison, he could have done that too. But he had gone further. He had suggested Catherine knew exactly what image people wanted and had shaped herself around it. That was personal. That was the line. And William was not backing away from it. Catherine remained seated. She did not interrupt him. She did not tell him to stop. She did not use the moment to attack Tom or Camilla. She watched quietly while William defended a boundary that, until that evening, nobody at the table had been foolish enough to test so openly.
One lesson I've learned is you never let them in too far, because it's very difficult to get them back out again. And you've got to maintain a barrier and a boundary.
William's anger was no longer hidden, still controlled, still measured, but unmistakable. He told Tom that Catherine had spent years being compared with everybody except herself. Every outfit, every photograph, every public moment had been examined against somebody else's memory. She had carried it without turning those comparisons into resentment. And now Tom wanted to use that pressure as proof that she had manufactured who she was. William would not allow it. If Catherine has spent long enough being judged against everyone except herself, then viewers who believe William was right to draw that line should make their position clear. Like the video, subscribe, and put "Respect Catherine" in the comments. Sometimes silence looks neutral when it is really permission. Back at the table, Tom's expression had changed. The confidence was gone. He began another explanation, but William cut through it with a question nobody had expected. Was this really something Tom had only thought of tonight? The room changed again, because that question was no longer about one sentence. It was about where the sentence had come from. Tom hesitated, just for a moment, but everyone saw it. William did too. He asked again, more quietly this time. Was this the first time Tom had spoken about Catherine that way? Camilla's face tightened. Catherine finally looked up. Tom opened his mouth, but no answer came quickly enough. And before he could decide what to say, Charles finally spoke. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not tell William to sit down. He did not rush to defend Tom. For several seconds, he simply looked across the table, first at Catherine, then at Tom, as though weighing whether there was any graceful way left to rescue the evening. There was not. When Charles finally spoke, the words were brief. Tom owed Catherine an apology. That was all. No speech, no lecture, no attempt to soften it. And somehow that made the rebuke heavier. Only minutes earlier, Charles had been speaking about Catherine as one of the people helping carry the monarchy forward. Tom had taken that conversation and turned it into something poisonous. Now Charles had drawn his own line. Tom looked toward Camilla. Camilla was trapped. If she challenged William, she risked making the insult look worse. If she openly condemned Tom, she would be rebuking her own son in front of the family. And if she said nothing, the silence itself would become a question. So she stayed still. That was when the atmosphere changed again. The argument was no longer only about whether Tom had gone too far. William had decided that. Charles had now made his position clear. The deeper problem was the one Tom still had not answered. Why had he been so comfortable saying it? Tom tried once more to retreat into explanation. He said his comments had been about image, about the way public figures understood expectation, about how certain roles carried memories that shaped how people responded. William heard evasion. Nothing more. Because the question was simpler than that. Had Tom thought this before? Had he said it before? And most importantly, who else spoke about Catherine that way? Tom did not give him a clean answer. He talked around it. He said people made comparisons all the time. He said the media did it constantly. But William had not asked about newspapers. He had asked about people around the family. That distinction hung in the room. Catherine still said nothing. She could have turned the moment against Tom. She could have demanded an apology. She could have asked Camilla whether she agreed with her son. She did none of it. Her restraint became the most uncomfortable part of the evening, because Tom had just suggested that Catherine knew how to manufacture dignity for public consumption. And there she sat, with no cameras present, refusing to humiliate the man who had humiliated her. William noticed. So did Charles. So did Camilla. The irony was impossible to miss. Tom had accused Catherine of performing grace, while Catherine was giving the room the strongest evidence that grace did not need an audience. Then came the apology. It was not dramatic. Tom said he had not intended to insult her. He said the point had been poorly expressed. He accepted that the comparison had gone too far. But the apology did not answer William's question. Where had the idea come from? That was what remained. The dinner never recovered. Conversations tried to restart, then faded. Charles said very little. Camilla remained guarded. Tom had lost the easy confidence he had carried earlier. Catherine finally spoke only enough to bring the confrontation to an end. She did not retaliate. She did not punish him. She simply made it clear that the subject had gone far enough. That should have closed the matter. For William, it did not, because an insult could be answered. An apology could be accepted. A bad sentence could be blamed on poor judgment. But hesitation was different. Tom had hesitated when William asked whether he had spoken this way before, and now that hesitation had become the detail William could not leave alone. Was it merely discomfort? Was Tom searching for the right words? Or had William touched something Tom had not expected anyone to ask about? Nobody at that table answered it. And still, nobody offered the one answer that might have brought William's suspicion to an end before it hardened. Camilla did not. Tom did not. Charles did not press him. And Catherine, still refusing to turn the evening into something uglier, allowed the silence to remain. The dinner began to break apart. Chairs moved. Voices lowered. People started leaving the table with the stiff politeness of a gathering that had ended long before anyone officially admitted it. William stayed close to Catherine. Tom remained behind with Camilla, and what had begun as praise for Catherine's future inside the monarchy had ended with one uncomfortable question. Not whether Tom regretted what he had said, not whether Catherine had been hurt. Something else. Who had been talking about Catherine when William was not there? That was the question that followed him out of the room. And when the dinner finally broke apart, it was not Tom's insult William kept returning to. It was the question Tom had never answered. The dinner ended without anyone formally ending it. No easy return to small talk. The room had run out of places to go. Catherine rose quietly. She gathered herself, offered the smallest sign of courtesy the moment required, and left the table with the same control she had shown through the confrontation. She did not ask anyone to follow her, and she did not need to. William was already moving before the door had fully closed behind her. William followed. That was when the room truly changed. For Tom, the remark that had probably sounded sharp, clever, even sophisticated when it first formed, had become something else entirely. He had tried to present it as commentary about image and history. Instead, it had exposed a fault line running through the family. Camilla remained seated, caught between embarrassment and anger. Her son had crossed a line in front of the Prince and Princess of Wales, and there was no painless way for her to respond. Defending Tom too strongly would make the insult look endorsed. Turning on him would mean publicly abandoning her own son. Silence protected nobody. Charles understood the damage too. The evening had been meant to reflect stability, the future, continuity, confidence in the next generation. Instead, it had ended by showing how quickly old history could enter a modern room and split it apart. But William's anger was never really about clothing. It was not about photographs. It was not even about the fact that Catherine and Diana had sometimes been compared by the public. That had happened for years. The real wound was deeper. Tom had questioned whether Catherine's goodness belonged to Catherine at all. That was the accusation beneath everything. Her warmth could be rehearsed. Her restraint could be calculated. Her ability to connect could be something learned rather than something felt. And Britain's affection for her could, in Tom's telling, be the result of knowing exactly which memories to awaken. That was what brought William out of his chair, because William knew the woman behind the public appearances. He knew what Catherine looked like when there were no cameras waiting for a reaction. He knew how she carried pressure before the doors opened and after they closed. He knew the difference between something performed for a crowd and something lived when nobody was watching. Tom had reduced all of that to image. Then he had tied that image to Diana. For William, that crossed both sides of the same emotional line. His wife had been diminished. His mother's memory had been used to do it. That was why Tom's attempts to hide behind phrases like public perception never worked. William had heard the argument underneath the vocabulary. Catherine was not being Catherine. She was supposedly giving Britain a carefully assembled version of a woman it already missed. And William could not accept that. Not in silence. Not at his own family's table. Still, once the anger settled, something else remained. A question. Tom Parker Bowles was not an outsider passing judgment from a newspaper column or television studio. He was Queen Camilla's son. He had been sitting only feet away from William and Catherine when he felt comfortable enough to say what he said. So where had the idea come from? Had Tom formed the opinion entirely on his own? Had he listened to years of public comparisons and drawn his own conclusion? Had he heard similar observations elsewhere? Had Catherine's popularity, her image, even the public affection surrounding her, been discussed differently in private rooms where William was not present? There was no answer. William had asked Tom whether this was really something he had only thought of that evening. Tom never gave him the clean answer he wanted. Because a cruel remark can be challenged, an apology can be demanded, a boundary can be drawn. But an unanswered question does something different. It stays. If Tom had been willing to say those words with William directly across from him, what had been said when William was not in the room? That was the part the dinner could not resolve. If Catherine deserves to be judged for the woman she actually is, not endlessly measured against Diana or anyone else, then viewers can make that support unmistakable. Like the video, subscribe to Palace Beacon, share it with someone who remembers what Diana meant to Britain, and write "Respect Catherine" in the comments. Because the next story goes further. It turns to the private moment after the dinner when one member of the family tried to explain what Tom had really meant, and William heard one specific name that made him stop walking. That name changes the entire question of where the remark may have started. And that is where the next video begins.